This is the last time that we'll be looking at this little puggle because we are now near the end, at the end of the nephron. We're going to be talking about the last part now, the collecting tubule and duct. We've gone through now the glomerulus, Bowman's capsule, the proximal convoluted tube, the loop of Henle, distal convoluted tube, and this is where we're at now, okay? The last part. Let's get into it. So right here, I have a simplified diagram of what's right here. Okay, we've got the proximal convoluted tube, so this part, which goes into the loop of Henle. We've got the distal convoluted tube, this part, and then that leads into the final part, the loop of Henle. Right here, I have a vessel, because you should know that at all times, there's a blood vessel coming, the efferent arteriole, that follows the whole pathway along, just like this, because if the vessel wasn't there, everything that leaves the tubule would just be nowhere. It needs to return back to the bloodstream, right? So the vessel just follows everywhere to help excrete stuff out of the vessel and helps take stuff up out of the tubule, okay? So no, it's always there. Now, to understand the collecting duct or the collecting tubule, we need to remember what happened in the loop of Henle. So remember, the loop of Henle, its sole purpose was to create a concentration gradient from the top outside of the tubule to the bottom, meaning near the top of this loop of Henle, it was the least concentrated. So everything at this level was the least concentrated. And as you go lower, so the next level will be more concentrated. So everything outside, all around, okay? Just because I put the molecules here doesn't mean it's not everywhere. This molecule represents everywhere at this level. Now, third layer, even more concentrated and more concentrated. So as you go down, it gets more and more concentrated with ions, okay? Bear this in mind because this is going to be super important. Now, as everything passes through the tubules, eventually we get to the distal tubule. So at this point, there's still some water, still some ions, and some things left, some bad things that you need to pee out, right? Now, we know there's a lot of water left because when we pee water, right? This tubule is super interesting because it can decide whether or not it wants water to leave or stay. So it can decide whether it wants you to pee more or pee less. So that's what's really interesting about this tubule, okay? So my question is now, okay, how does this tubule decide to keep or let water go? How does it decide that? So the key is, it doesn't decide that, your brain does, and I'm going to show you exactly how now. So here we have a brain, okay? We have a person's head, okay? Here's the brain. And we're gonna build a little diagram here and it's gonna make all sense. So let's open this magic box. So you need to know that in your brain, just like in the rest of your body, you have small little vessels like this, a blood vessel, okay? Now this blood vessel is special because it can sense if you have enough water or not in your vessels, okay? So it's an osmoreceptor. It senses osmolarity if you have enough water, okay? Now, when it senses, for example, let's pretend this guy right here is a starving kid, okay? I mean, dehydrated kid, and he needs to conserve water. He needs to pee as little as possible. He needs to keep all the possible water he can in his body. Otherwise, he's gonna die. So in this kid's head, this osmoreceptor in this vessel will stimulate or send a signal to something called the pituitary gland. So this thing right here. It's a little part of the brain. Okay, it's called specifically it's going to send to the posterior pituitary gland. So the pituitary gland has an anterior and a posterior aspect. But in this specific scenario, we only care about the posterior pituitary gland. And this gland, once it receives a signal from the vessel that there's not that much blood left, or we don't have that much water in our vessels, then this gland is going to respond. Okay, and it responds by sending or producing a molecule called ADH and putting it into our bloodstream. So it's going to make a molecule, put it into our bloodstream. Okay, now leave these two things here for now because we're not going to care about. We're going to come back to this. Okay, this stuff here. So when it creates this molecule now travels just like any other molecule in the bloodstream. It's going to go down. Now, follow. Now so here's the molecule. It's going to travel down from the brain in the vessel, down the artery, and then some of it will go into the kidney by this little branch, right? So as it travels here, through this little branch into the kidney, it's going to go into the smallest branches, and eventually, it's going to reach the nephron, okay? Just like this. When it reaches the nephron, let me show you something. So let's take it. Let's go back to the nephron. Oh, schnitzel. So here we go. Sorry. Here we go. So it's going to go now and enter the nephron. Some of it will get, this molecule is special because it can't really get filtered that much. Okay, it can get filtered, but not that much. So a lot of it will stay in the bloodstream, just like this. So it's not going to get filtered. It follows, blah, blah, blah. It keeps going, keeps going, keeps going. And eventually it reaches this part next to the collecting tubule. And it's special because guess what? Let's keep bringing it down. So it's basically here next to this collecting duct. Collecting tubule. So now when it reaches here, what it can do is it can enter the collecting duct, okay, and tell the cells to make a molecule called aquaporin, okay? So the more of this, the more aquaporins will be made. So what exactly is aquaporin? So aquaporin is this. Let me show you. Is this thing here. So this molecule here represents aquaporins, okay? Aqua means water, porins is like a pipe, okay? So it's a pipe for water. So here we go. So once this thing comes and it stimulates the cells to make aquaporins. So let's say it puts in a bunch of aquaporins everywhere. Now what's going to happen is this. These things are little channels that allow water to exit, okay? So in this very dehydrated kid, we have now a lot of these things made in the collecting tubule. And so now all the water or most of the water inside this tubule will be able to leave. So for example, now this is where the concentration aspect becomes important. So right now we know at this level it's somewhat concentrated, but not really. So only a little bit of water can leave because we know water travels by osmosis to concentrated places, right? To even out the concentration, make it dilute. But if it's not that concentrated here, not that many water molecules will leave. So maybe a little bit, okay? Maybe a little bit will leave. So we still have a lot in our tubule. But as we go down, it gets more and more concentrated outside. So once we get to this aquaporin, it will be so concentrated outside that so much water will leave in order to be able to cancel out this concentration gradient. Okay, so the lower we go, the more water will leave. So we have so much water leave to be able to even out this concentration gradient. Now what this means is there's not much water left in our nephron, in our collecting tubule, and most of it was taken out into this space. And now from this space, these water molecules, so this space here, represents everywhere, just not inside the tube. So it I could have made the water molecules come out this side. It doesn't matter. Now, when these water molecules left, they can go into the bloodstream. Okay, so let me make it clear. So these water molecules can now go into the bloodstream, and so it returns to your blood, making your blood more full of water, fixing your original problem, because now your body has enough water. You're keeping so much water that your bloodstream is filled up again. And now, guess what? Do you think you will pee more now or pee less? Let's think about it. So if we have less water now inside our tubule, say 1 drop, this water molecule will now travel down, where? Let me show you. It will now travel down this tubule. So this is, here I just have the big picture. Here we have the nephron, because we know it's located in between the medulla and the cortex. And we know here the water molecule is. It's coming. It's leaving this collecting tubule into this space called the medulla, and then it goes down into this empty space here called the renal pelvis, and then finally it exits here through the ureter. And now this is the ureter, this thing right here, and we know the ureter leads to the bladder. So finally this droplet gets to the bladder, but it was only 1 droplet, so you're not going to pee that much. Okay, so basically ADH is a water molecule. It's a molecule made by your posterior pituitary gland in the time where we're in a water crisis. You don't have enough water. You have low water in your body, in your bloodstream. So it's made to stimulate the production of these things called aquaporins in your collecting duct. These aquaporins allow water to exit out of this tubule and be reabsorbed back into your bloodstream, so you conserve more water and can stay more hydrated. Okay, so now this starving or this dehydrated kid will be able to live a bit longer. Okay, but it still needs to find water, otherwise eventually you'll have no more water to conserve. Okay, so that's how the collecting duct works. It's pretty interesting, right? So now I want to ask you something real quick. Oh yeah, first before I ask you that, just so you know, ADH is called anti-diuretic hormone. ADH, anti-diuretic. But every time I tell this to people, they just shut down. This word is too big. So I'm gonna make a way for you to remember this. Top tip to help remember the purpose of ADH. You can think anti-dehydration hormone. Okay, this is the real name, anti-diuretic hormone, but you can think anti-dehydration. It helps you to not be dehydrated by conserving water. Okay, so that's how I would say remember it if you have trouble remembering this name. Now my question is the final bit. Do you think you'd be able to conserve water better if you have a shorter loop of Henle? Meaning, for example, let's say it was like this. So instead of being all the way down here, it was like this. Do you think you'd be able to conserve water better or not? The answer should be no, because if you have a shorter loop of Henle, it means you cannot create such a big concentration gradient, so instead it stops here. So where it's only three suns, like only a little bit concentrated. So this means that only a little bit of water can be released. So instead of having like 3 whole water molecules be absorbed, maybe you can only have 1, and so you'll pee more. So that brings me to the question, do you think camels have a longer loop of Henle or a shorter loop of Henle? Shorter loop of Henle or a longer loop of Henle? Yes, they should have insanely long ones. They go really deep, because by having such insanely long ones, the concentration gradient goes so big, because right now it's this big, but it's going to go even bigger down, which means you can suck out every bit of water through the collecting duct. Okay? Obviously, we still pee even if we're dehydrated. That's because we don't have humans don't have such long loop of Henles. So some water will always remain in our collecting tubules, and so we'll always pee even if we're dehydrated. Okay? So that's just an interesting thing to know, that different animals have different lengths of these loop of Henles, and this helps them conserve water at different ratios or at different extents. Okay, now this is the thing I wanted to talk about before. So there are some things you need to know that inhibit ADH production. Wait, so let me get this thing back. So I explained this before. So there are some things that inhibit this process. So for example, if you drink coffee or alcohol, maybe you've drunk alcohol before, but you'll notice if you drink a lot of alcohol, you pee a lot. That's because alcohol inhibits ADH production. And we know ADH is responsible for helping you make aquaporins to keep water out of your urine, to make you pee less. So if you inhibit this process, that means you're going to pee more. So that's why when you drink alcohol, you pee a lot. That's the same with coffee. You'll pee a lot if you drink caffeine. Same in cold conditions, okay? Now, so sometimes, I don't know if you've ever noticed, if you go into some really cold pool or something, it's very tempting to pee, right? So I'm not saying pee in the pool, but it's tempting. Now, there are some other things on the contrary that can stimulate ADH production. So stress. When you're really, really stressed, can you pee? Do you think about peeing? No. That's because stress can stimulate ADH production, meaning it stimulates you to keep water, okay? And this is kind of a survivorship mechanism, because if you're stressed, it means in nature, maybe you're about to be attacked by someone and you want to keep all your water so that if you get attacked and you bleed, you have more water to bleed so you can survive for a bit longer. Okay, nicotine, so in smoking, you'll also notice an increase in ADH production, and this means smokers tend to pee less, okay? So this is it. That was all of it, guys. I hope the Nephron made sense, and I hope you understand everything. I will make a video where I pretty much summarize all the effects in one video, because right now I made a video with many little parts to it, but I'll give one overall video just to make sure everything is brought together. But I hope this made sense.